The first time I realized a house could be a weapon was the morning my ex-husband stood on my porch and smiled like he'd already won. Not a big smile, not a happy one. The kind of smile men practice in mirrors when they want you to feel small. It was a bright Monday in a quiet suburb outside Columbus, Ohio. Blue sky, cold air, the kind of winter morning that makes the world look clean, even when your life isn't. I was still in my robe, hair clipped up, coffee warming my hands, when my phone buzzed with the security camera alert. Motion detected. I glanced at the screen, and my stomach did something slow and heavy. Evan, standing there like he belonged. He had on that charcoal coat he used to wear to important meetings. The one that made him look responsible. He was holding a folder under one arm, and behind him, parked along the curb, was a white box truck. Not a U-Haul, a real moving truck. I didn't move at first. I just listened to the silence in the house, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock in the hallway, and the way my own breathing sounded too loud. Then my phone buzzed again. A text from Evan. Open the door. We need to do this the easy way. Easy. That word always meant something different when Evan said it. I walked to the front window and pulled the curtain back just enough to see his face. He looked relaxed, like a man who had slept well, like a man who believed he had finally erased me. I didn't open the door. I tapped the speaker through the camera instead. What do you want? He leaned closer to the doorbell camera, like we were old friends. I'm here to take what's mine, he said. The house is in my name, Olivia. The divorce is final. You've had enough time. He said my name like it tasted bitter. Olivia Stone, 38. Compliance manager at a mid-sized insurance company. A job that trains you to read fine print. And still somehow, I'd missed the one line that mattered most. Because love has a way of making you sign things you wouldn't sign, if you were thinking clearly. I stared at him through the glass. The house is also where I live, I said, voice steady. You can't just show up with a truck. He laughed, short, dismissive. I can, he said, because legally, you're not on the deed. There it was, the sentence he'd been saving. I felt my chest tighten, not with surprise exactly, but with that familiar mix of anger and disbelief. Because I remembered the day he asked me to simplify paperwork. I remembered the kitchen table, the pen, the way he kissed my forehead after I signed. I remembered thinking I was signing something boring. I didn't know I was signing myself out of my own home. I swallowed, slow. And why? I asked. Are you so sure? Evan lifted the folder. I have a copy of the deed. I have the court order. I cut him off. You also have something else, I said quietly. He frowned. What are you talking about? I stared at his face on my phone screen. The debt, I said. The house might be in your name, but the debt is in mine. His eyes flickered, just once, a tiny crack. Then he scoffed. Don't start, he said. You're always trying to be dramatic. I almost smiled at that, because it wasn't drama. It was math. It was paper. It was a loan statement that showed up in my mailbox 3 weeks after our divorce was finalized, addressed to me, with a balance so large my hands went cold. A home equity line of credit. Not small, not manageable. 6 figures. And my name was the only name on it. I hadn't slept right since that envelope arrived. I'd opened it standing at the kitchen counter, the same counter I'd picked out, paid for, and cleaned for years. I'd read it twice, then 3 times. Then I'd logged into my credit report, and watch my score drop like a stone thrown into dark water. That's when I learned the truth that should have been impossible. The house was his. The debt was mine. And somehow, Evan had made that happen. I didn't understand it at first. I thought maybe it was a mistake, a lender error, a clerical issue. But then I saw the origination date. 2 months before he asked for the divorce. 2 months before he stopped touching my hand at dinner. 2 months before he started sleeping on the couch because he had back pain. 2 months before he looked me in the eyes and said, "We should talk." He'd been planning while I was still trying. I stared at Evan through the camera. "You need to leave," I said. He leaned back and shrugged, like I was being difficult about the weather. "I'm not leaving," he said. "You can do this one of 2 ways. You can pack your stuff, or I can have the sheriff come." There was a woman's voice behind him then, soft, impatient. "Evan, just tell her. We don't have all day." My stomach twisted. I recognized that voice. Tracy, his co-worker from the real estate office. The one he told me not to worry about. The one who used to comment little heart emojis on his posts like she was practicing being seen. Tracy stepped into view, just the edge of her face at first, then her full body, long blonde hair, perfect scarf, new boots. The kind of confidence you get when you think you're taking someone else's life, and no one can stop you. She looked at the camera and smiled. "Oh my God," she said, laughing lightly. "She's still in there? That's awkward." My fingers tightened around my phone. Evan's face hardened. "Olivia," he said, lower now. "Open the door. Don't make this ugly." Ugly. Another word he loved. Ugly meant he would push harder. Ugly meant he would embarrass me in front of neighbors. Ugly meant he would use the law like a bat, even if he was lying. I inhaled, and I did something that surprised even me. I unlocked the door, not because I was scared, because I wanted him to look into my eyes when I said it. I opened the door just enough to step onto the porch, letting the cold hit my face like a slap. Evan's gaze slid over me, robe, bare feet, hair clipped back. He looked pleased. Tracy looked amused, and the moving truck driver looked bored, like he'd seen this scene before. Evan held out a paper. "Court order," he said. "You have 1 hour." I didn't take it. I looked down at the paper, then back up at him. "You want me out," I said softly, "so you can move her in." Tracy's smile widened. Evan's jaw flexed. "This isn't about her," he snapped. "This is about you not being on the deed." I nodded. "Right," I said. "The deed you told me was just paperwork. The deed you said would help with taxes. The deed you said was temporary." Evan's eyes narrowed. "You signed," he said. "I did," I agreed. "And then you took out a HELOC under my name." The driver shifted uncomfortably. Tracy blinked. Evan laughed again, but this time it sounded forced. "I didn't take anything under your name," he said. "You're losing it." I held his gaze. "I called the bank," I said. "They verified the account. They confirmed my SSN. They confirmed my signature on file." His face changed. Not much, but enough. "Okay," he said quickly, waving a hand like it was nothing. "So maybe there's a loan. So what? That's your problem. You wanted to be independent so badly. Congrats. Handle it." That's when it hit me. He wasn't just trying to take the house. He was trying to leave me with a bomb, a debt big enough to ruin my life, while he walked away into a house that looked clean and paid off, because his name was on the deed and mine wasn't. He wanted the picture, the asset, the stability, and he wanted me holding the mess. Tracy stepped closer, voice sweet. "Olivia," she said, like we were friends. "Honestly, you should just move on. It's over. Move on." As if credit scores grow back like hair, as if lenders forget, as if debt doesn't follow you into every apartment application, every car loan, every job background check, every future you try to build. I looked at her. Then I looked back at Evan. "You know what's funny?" I said. Evan frowned. "What?" I pointed at the folder. "You brought papers?" I said. "I brought papers too." Evan's eyes flicked to my hand. I hadn't been empty-handed. In my robe pocket, folded tight, was a printout. A loan statement. My loan statement. The one he thought I wouldn't understand. The one he thought I'd panic over and quietly pay. While he moved Tracy into my old bedroom. I pulled it out slowly and held it up. Evan's eyes went flat. Tracy's smile faltered. "This," I said, "is a debt tied to this property. Collateral. Recorded. Linked to the address." Evan scoffed, but I saw his throat move. "That doesn't matter," he said. "The house is mine." "Is it?" I asked. My voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Because the neighbors were already peeking through blinds. I could feel it. That quiet suburban curiosity. The kind that spreads like smoke. Evan stepped forward, lowering his voice. "You don't know what you're talking about," he hissed. "Go inside. Don't embarrass yourself." I didn't move. I leaned in too, matching his volume. "I work in compliance," I said. "I spend my life tracing liability. Do you know what happens when collateral debt is in one spouse's name, and the deed is in the other's? And the underwriting file shows marital funds were used to pay it?" Evan's eyes flashed. "You're bluffing?" he said. I shook my head. "I'm learning," I said. "And here's what I learned first. You can't keep a house clean if the foundation is borrowed money in my name." Tracy's voice sharpened. "What does that even mean?" I looked at her. "It means," I said calmly, "if you move in here, you're moving into a property tied to my debt. And if it goes unpaid, the bank doesn't care whose name is on the deed. They care whose name is on the note and what the collateral is." Evan's lips pressed into a thin line. The driver cleared his throat, awkward. Do you guys still want me to—" "Not now," Evan snapped without looking back. Then he turned back to me, smiling again. But it wasn't the mirror smile anymore. It was the smile of someone trying not to panic. "Olivia," he said, "let's talk inside. Like adults." He wanted privacy. Because privacy is where men like Evan do their best work. Where they can twist words. Where they can soften threats into reasonable suggestions. Where they can make you feel like the crazy one. I didn't invite him in. I stayed in the doorway and let the cold be my witness. "No," I said simply. His smile tightened. "Fine," he said. "Then I'll call the sheriff. You can explain your little debt story to them." I nodded slowly. "Please do," I said. "And while you're at it, call your bank too." Evan blinked. "Why?" I tilted my head, almost gently. "Because I filed a dispute," I said, "and I requested the full underwriting file, and I asked a question they can't ignore." His face went pale. Tracy stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "What question?" I looked at Evan and let the words land carefully, like placing a glass on a table you don't want to break. "I asked," I said, "how a married woman with steady income ended up as the sole borrower on a 6-figure home equity line, without her spouse listed, and without her spouse's income on the file, even though the property was owned by her spouse. Evan's throat bobbed. "Stop," he muttered. I didn't. "Do you know what that sounds like?" I asked. "To a lender? To an auditor? To an investigator?" Evan's eyes darted to the street, to the neighbors, to the truck, to Tracy. He spoke through his teeth. "You're trying to threaten me." I shook my head. "I'm trying to survive," I said, "because you tried to bury me." Tracy's voice rose. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "You're just angry because you lost." I stared at her. "No," I said. "I'm angry because he tried to win by cheating." Evan's hand flexed around the folder. For a second, just a second, I saw what he was capable of. Not violence, worse, cold calculation, the kind that smiles while it ruins you. Then he exhaled, forcing calm. "Olivia," he said, louder, like he was performing for the street now. "You have 1 hour. If you're still here, I will remove you legally." I nodded once. "Okay," I said, and I stepped back inside. Not to pack, to make a call, because there was one more thing I hadn't said out loud yet. The debt was in my name, and that meant I wasn't powerless. It meant I was the fuse. And if Evan insisted on lighting it, I would make sure he was standing close enough to feel the burn. I closed the door and locked it, not because I thought a lock would stop him, but because I needed 30 seconds of silence without his voice in my face. My hands were steady. My heart wasn't. That's the strange thing about betrayal. Your body reacts like it's drowning, even when your brain is already building a plan. I walked to the kitchen, set my coffee down, and opened my laptop. The loan statement was still on the counter beside yesterday's mail, like it had been sitting there waiting for me to grow teeth. Account number, balance, lien type, home equity line of credit, collateral, 1427, Brookhaven Drive. My home, my former home, according to Evan. I took one breath, then another, and I dialed the number I'd saved under a name that made me feel safer than it should have. Title. The title company. The first person who had spoken to me like I wasn't crazy, like what I was describing was not only possible, but familiar. They'd asked me one question last week that I couldn't forget. "Did you ever sign a quitclaim deed?" I had said yes, because I remembered the kitchen table, the pen, the forehead kiss. They had gone quiet for a second. Then, "Okay, we're going to pull the recording." They pulled it. And when they called back, their voice was different, careful, controlled. "Olivia," the woman said, "the deed was recorded, but the notary stamp looks inconsistent." Inconsistent. A polite word for fake. I had sat on my couch with my laptop open and my pulse in my ears while she explained what that could mean. A forged notarization, a rushed signing, a paperwork error, or fraud. And if there was fraud, it changed everything, because a deed recorded under fraud can be challenged, and a loan created under fraud can be disputed. And when you pull one thread in a neatly tied knot, sometimes the whole thing unravels. My phone rang before I even hit call on the title contact again. Unknown number. My stomach tightened. I answered anyway. "Hello?" A man's voice, professional and clipped. "Olivia Stone?" "Yes. This is Mark Delaney with Northlake Bank. We received a notice of dispute regarding your home equity line of credit." My throat went dry. "Okay," I said, keeping my tone calm. "Yes, I filed that." There was a pause, the kind that feels like someone reading a file while deciding if you're a problem. "Ms. Stone," he said, You're listed as the sole borrower on the account. Your payment is past due." I almost laughed. Of course it was. Evan had taken the money and left me with the bill, and now the clock was already ticking. "I understand," I said, "but I did not authorize that loan." He inhaled slowly, like he'd heard that sentence before. "Our records show your signature," he said. "I want the underwriting file," I replied. "The full file, application, disclosures, closing documents, notary information, everything. I want the call logs too, if you have them." Another pause. "May I ask why?" "Because my ex-husband is a liar," I wanted to say. "Because he played chess while I was trying to save a marriage. Because I refuse to be the woman who quietly pays for the crime someone else committed against her." But I kept my voice steady. "Because I'm contesting the validity," I said, "and because the collateral property is not solely owned by me, yet the loan was issued to me alone." He hesitated. "That doesn't necessarily—" "It does," I cut in gently, "especially if marital funds were used, especially if the deed transfer was signed under misrepresentation, especially if the notarization was improper." Silence. Then, more careful. "Ms. Stone, are you alleging fraud?" "Yes," I said. My own voice sounded strange saying it, like I was stepping onto a stage I never wanted to be on. He exhaled. "Okay," he said. "I'll escalate this to our fraud department. You'll receive a request for a sworn statement." "Send it," I said, "and put a hold on adverse reporting while it's investigated." He didn't promise, but he didn't refuse either. "We'll note your request," he said. When I ended the call, I stared at the screen for a second, breathing slow. Then my phone buzzed again, a text from Evan. "Clock's ticking." I didn't reply. I opened my email and sent one message to one person I had never met, but who already felt like an ally, my divorce attorney. Not the one Evan recommended, not the mediator who had smiled too much. A new one. A woman with sharp eyes and a reputation for being allergic to manipulation. Subject: urgent. Possible mortgage fraud / HELOC in my name tied to marital residence. I attached the statement. I typed fast, controlled. Evan has shown up with a moving truck. Claims house is solely his. But I received HELOC statement in my name as sole borrower. I did not knowingly authorize. Deed transfer may be fraudulent notarization. Need immediate legal guidance. He is attempting self-help eviction. Send. Then I walked to the hallway closet and pulled out the binder I'd started building like a woman building armor. Printouts, emails, texts, screenshots. A copy of the divorce decree. A copy of the court order Evan had waved like a flag. He wanted me to feel behind. He didn't know. I'd been catching up every night, quietly, while he slept like a man who thought consequences were for other people. Outside, I heard the thud of someone walking down my porch steps. Then a knock, harder this time. "Olivia," Evan's voice. "Open up." I stayed silent. Another knock. Then Tracy's voice, sharper. "Seriously? You're going to act like a child?" I walked to the window and peeked. They were still there. The truck idling, Evan pacing, Tracy leaning against her car like she was waiting for a table at a restaurant. And then the street changed. A black and white cruiser rolled slowly past my house. My breath caught. Not the sheriff. Not yet. Just a patrol car doing its loop. But Evan saw it too. His posture shifted. Because men like Evan love to threaten calling the police until police actually appear. I watched him step toward the curb and lift his hand like he was waving down help. The cruiser slowed, then stopped. The officer rolled down his window. Evan leaned in, talking animatedly, pointing at my door. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read body language. Evan was telling a story. The officer was listening, but not reacting the way Evan expected. Then the officer stepped out. A woman, mid-40s, calm face, hands resting near her belt, not aggressive, just ready. She walked up my driveway with Evan following behind her like a shadow. My heart pounded, but my mind stayed strangely clear, because this was the moment Evan wanted. He wanted me to open the door for authority, so he could stand behind it and look innocent. I inhaled, placed my binder on the entry table, and opened the door. Not wide, just enough. The officer looked at me. "Ma'am," she said, "are you Olivia Stone?" "Yes." "I'm Officer Ramirez," she said. "This gentleman says you're refusing to vacate a property he owns." I looked at Evan. He lifted his chin, smug. "It's my house," he said. "She's not on the deed." Officer Ramirez turned her gaze back to me. "Is that true?" she asked. I didn't rush. I didn't argue. I spoke like a woman who had learned that calm is a weapon too. "The deed is in his name," I said. "But I live here, and he cannot remove me without a court-ordered eviction." He also arrived with a moving truck, which is an attempt at self-help eviction. Officer Ramirez's face didn't change. She looked at Evan. "Do you have an eviction order?" Evan hesitated, then held up his paper. "This is from the divorce," he said. "It says she has to be out." Officer Ramirez took the paper and scanned it. Her eyes moved left to right. Then she handed it back. "This is not an eviction order," she said. Evan's face tightened. "It's a court order," he insisted. "It's a divorce decree," Ramirez corrected. "That's a civil matter. If you want her removed, you need to file through housing court and obtain a writ. You can't just show up with a truck." Tracy rolled her eyes behind him. Evan's voice sharpened. "So she can just squat in my house?" Ramirez's gaze stayed steady. "She resides here," she said. "That gives her tenant rights at minimum. You can't change locks. You can't remove property. You can't intimidate her into leaving. If you do, you could be charged." Evan stared at her like he couldn't believe the world wasn't bending. He tried again, softer, more charming. "Officer, I'm just trying to move on. She's making this difficult." Officer Ramirez didn't smile. "Sir," she said, "this is not criminal. If you continue to harass her, it can become criminal." Then she looked at me. "Ma'am," she said, "do you feel safe?" I held her gaze. "Not with them on my porch," I said. Evan snapped. "Are you kidding me?" Ramirez turned back to him. "You need to leave the property," she said. "Now. Both of you." Evan's face went red. "This is unbelievable," he muttered. But he stepped back. Because Evan loved power, but he feared consequences. Tracy leaned toward him, whispering harshly. He motioned to the truck driver, frustrated. "Go," he barked. "We'll come back." He looked at me then, eyes cold. "This isn't over," he said quietly. I didn't flinch. "I know," I said, and he hated that I agreed, because it meant I wasn't afraid. Officer Ramirez waited until they were in their cars. The truck pulled away, slow. Evan's car rolled behind it. Tracy's car followed, her head turning toward my house one last time, like she wanted to memorize what she thought she'd soon own. When they were gone, the street exhaled. Officer Ramirez looked at me again. "You should document everything," she said. "If he comes back, call us. Don't engage." "I will," I said. She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "And if there's a dispute over debt or fraud, consider contacting an attorney today. My throat tightened. I already did, I said. Ramirez nodded once, like she respected that. Then she left. I closed my door and leaned against it, feeling my knees go slightly weak now that the adrenaline had permission. For a moment, I let myself breathe. Then my phone buzzed. An email from my attorney. One line in bold at the top. Olivia, do not move out. I stared at it, heart pounding. Then I opened the rest. She wrote fast, direct. If the HELOC is in your name and tied to the property, that is leverage. If the deed transfer involved misrepresentation or improper notarization, we may have grounds to challenge the deed and seek injunctive relief. Also, if he applied for credit in your name without consent, we will involve the bank's fraud unit. Do not speak with him without counsel. Save all texts. We can file an emergency motion if needed. Emergency motion, injunctive relief, words that sounded like a door opening. My phone buzzed again. Evan. This time, not a text, a voicemail. I let it play. His voice was quieter than before, but tight. Olivia, listen. Let's not blow this up. We can work something out. Just call me. I stared at the voicemail screen, because that was the first time Evan had sounded like a man who wasn't sure. And that's when I knew the debt in my name wasn't just a problem. It was a spotlight, and Evan was terrified of what it would reveal. I walked back to the kitchen, opened my laptop again, and typed a phrase into a search bar that made my fingers tremble. HELOC fraud, spouse deed notary. A flood of results, stories, cases, forums, women and men who had been handed debt like a curse. People who had discovered that a signature can be verified until someone proves it wasn't theirs. That a notary stamp can look official until a real investigator checks it. And then my eyes caught on something else. A detail I hadn't noticed before. On the loan statement, under correspondence address. It wasn't my address. It wasn't 1427 Brookhaven. It was a P.O. box. A P.O. box in a town 20 minutes away. I stared at it. My mouth went dry. Because I'd never opened a P.O. box in my life, which meant Evan had. He didn't just take out debt in my name. He controlled where the warnings went. He controlled the mail. He controlled the timeline. He controlled how long he could siphon money before I noticed. My hands shook now. Not from fear, from rage. I called the bank back immediately and demanded the address change history. They wouldn't give it on the phone, but they confirmed it existed, and they confirmed it was requested online from an IP address 2 months before the divorce. The picture was forming. Not a mistake, a plan. I sat down at the table where I had once signed paperwork with a forehead kiss, and I opened a blank document. I started a timeline, date of HELOC origination, date of address change, date Evan filed for divorce, date he moved out, date I received the first statement, because the P.O. box must have missed it, or the bank sent one copy to the property address by law. Every fact became a nail. Every nail became a board, and board by board, I started building something Evan never expected me to build, a case. My phone buzzed again, a text from Tracy this time. Stop being bitter. You lost. Move on. I stared at her words. Then I did something I'd never done in my life. I replied, just one line. Tell him the fraud department called. It wasn't true, not yet. But it was bait. And within 30 seconds, my phone rang. Evan. I let it ring twice, then answered. Hello? His voice came fast. What did you tell her? I kept my tone calm. The truth, I said. That this is bigger than a house. He exhaled hard. You're making this into something it's not. I almost laughed. No, I said. You did, when you put debt in my name. Silence, then softer. Olivia, please, listen, I can pay it off. My stomach tightened. You can? I asked. With what money? He hesitated. I have ways. Ways. That word again. Ways meant lies. Ways meant shortcuts. Ways meant more damage. I lowered my voice. You're scared, I said. I'm not scared. Yes, you are, I said gently. Because if the bank investigates, they'll pull the closing file. They'll look at the notarization. They'll look at who benefited. They'll look at the address change. And then I let the sentence hang. Because the worst part wasn't the debt. The worst part was what it implied. Identity theft, loan fraud, maybe even mortgage fraud, felony words. Evan's voice tightened. What do you want? He asked. There it was. The first honest sentence. I looked down at my binder, at my timeline, at the house that was suddenly not just a home, but a battlefield. I want you to put everything in writing, I said. And I want my attorney included, Evan snapped. No attorneys. I smiled slightly. Then no deal, I said. He inhaled sharply. You're going to ruin everything. I kept my voice quiet. You already ruined it, I said. I'm just deciding who pays. Then I hung up. My hands trembled as I set the phone down. Not because I was weak, but because I finally understood the power in my hands. The debt was in my name. And if I chose to light that fuse, Evan would not be far enough away to pretend he didn't feel it. That afternoon, my attorney filed an emergency motion for temporary relief, an order preventing Evan from entering the property or interfering with my occupancy until the court could sort out the civil mess. And while she did that, I did something else. I drove to the P.O. box address because I needed to see it with my own eyes. The building was small, beige brick, with a sign that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 90s. I parked across the street and watched people come and go. My heart beat in my throat. Then I saw him, Evan, pulling into the parking lot like this was normal, like this wasn't the place he hid the truth. He got out, glanced around, and walked inside. I stayed in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel. Then I lifted my phone, and I recorded. Not his face, not his body, just the timestamp, and the fact that he was there, proof, a breadcrumb. And while I recorded, something else pulled into the lot behind him, a silver sedan. A man stepped out, older, wearing a jacket with a small logo on the chest. North Lake Bank. My breath caught. Evan didn't see him at first. He was too busy pretending he was in control. And I realized, in that quiet moment from across the street, this wasn't just going to be a divorce story. This was going to be a fraud story, a debt story, a story where the house might be in his name, but the truth was about to be in mine. I didn't follow Evan inside. I didn't need to. The moment I saw the man in the North Lake jacket, I knew something had shifted. Because banks don't send people in branded jackets unless they think money is at risk. And money was at risk. My money, my credit, my future. And now, Evan's clean little story was at risk too. I waited in my car until Evan came back out. He walked faster than he had going in, shoulders tense, folder clutched tight. He opened his trunk, threw something in, and glanced around like he felt eyes on him. He didn't see me. He didn't know I was across the street with my phone recording the way his control was starting to fracture. Then the bank man came out after him, holding a clipboard. He didn't chase Evan. He didn't grab him. He just watched him leave, like a man memorizing a suspect. Evan got in his car and drove off. The bank man got into the silver sedan and stayed parked. I sat there a moment longer, heart pounding. Then I made a choice. I pulled into the lot, parked 2 spaces away from the silver sedan, and stepped out. The cold hit my face. My breath fogged. I walked toward the man carefully, not aggressive, not frantic, just deliberate. He glanced up. His eyes landed on me, neutral, professional. "Can I help you?" he asked. I swallowed. "My name is Olivia Stone," I said. "I have a home equity line of credit with Northlake Bank, the one tied to Brookhaven Drive." His expression changed slightly. Not surprise. Recognition. "Ms. Stone," he said slowly. "Yes, I'm aware." My throat tightened. "You were just inside," I said. "With Evan Hart." He looked at me for a second, weighing what he could say. Then he nodded once. "We're conducting account verification," he said. Account verification? Another polite phrase for something smells wrong. I held his gaze. "I didn't authorize that loan," I said, "and I believe he used a P.O. box to intercept statements." The man's face tightened. "Ms. Stone," he said carefully, "I can't discuss details in the parking lot." I nodded. "I'm not asking for details," I said. "I'm asking you to document this, right now, that you saw him accessing the P.O. box tied to correspondence changes for my account." His eyes flicked down to his clipboard, then back to me. He didn't answer immediately, but he didn't say no. He simply said, "Please contact our fraud department today." I exhaled slowly. "I already did," I said, "and my attorney is preparing a sworn statement." That made him pause, a fraction of respect. "Good," he said. "Do that. And, Ms. Stone?" "Yes?" His voice lowered just a little. "Don't make any payments until fraud completes their initial review. If this is unauthorized, payments can complicate liability." My chest tightened. "Okay," I whispered. He nodded, then got into his car and drove away. And I stood in that parking lot, realizing I'd just crossed an invisible line. The bank believed me, enough to warn me. Evan believed I was weak, enough to risk everything. Now, one of them was going to learn they were wrong. 2 days later, the court granted the temporary order, not a dramatic sweeping victory, just a clean, simple piece of paper that said Evan could not enter the property, could not interfere with my occupancy, and could not attempt removal without a proper legal process. In plain language, he had to stop showing up like a conqueror. He had to act like a citizen. When my attorney emailed it, I printed it and taped it inside the front window, visible from the street. Not because I loved conflict, because I loved clarity. Evan didn't text that night. He didn't call. He went quiet, which is what manipulators do when they're scrambling, when they're calculating a new angle. But the bank didn't go quiet. The bank moved fast. A fraud investigator called me the following morning. Her name was Denise. Her voice was calm, but sharp. "Ms. Stone," she said, "I'm assigned to your case. I have a few questions." I sat at my kitchen table, binder open, timeline ready. "Okay," I said. "Did you ever sign closing documents for a home equity line of credit at a Northlake branch or through a mobile notary?" "No." "Did you request a P.O. box for correspondence?" "No." "Did you authorize anyone else to sign on your behalf?" "No." Silence while she typed. Then, "Our file shows your signature on a document titled Borrower Acknowledgement. It was notarized." My stomach tightened. "I want a copy," I said. "You'll have it," she replied. "But I need to ask, Were you present when a notary stamped any documents for you during that period? I thought back. 2 months before the divorce, 2 months before the couch, 2 months before the talk, the kitchen table, the pen. Evan saying, "Just sign, it's temporary." I closed my eyes. "Yes," I said softly, "but it wasn't for a loan. It was for paperwork." He said was for taxes. There was no notary present. No one. Just him. Denise's voice sharpened slightly. "No notary present," she repeated. "No." "Okay," she said. "That's significant." My throat tightened. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means," she said, "either the notarization is improper, or you were not properly identified, or the signer was not you." A slow chill ran through me. "Is this criminal?" I asked quietly. Denise didn't dramatize. "Potentially," she said. "If there was an identity misrepresentation or forged notarization, we don't determine criminal charges, but we do refer cases." Refer cases. I swallowed. "Denise," I said, "what happens to the loan?" She paused. "First, we lock the account," she said. "Then we investigate. If fraud is confirmed, we may remove liability from you and pursue recovery from the party who benefited." I exhaled shakily. "Which would be Evan." "We will follow the evidence," she said. "The evidence, my binder, my timeline, my recording of Evan at the P.O. box. The fact that the loan proceeds, when I demanded the transaction history, had been wired into an account I didn't recognize. An account with a name that made my stomach twist. Hart Property Solutions, LLC. Evan's new business. His fresh start. The place he was planning to tuck my stolen money and live happily ever after. Denise requested my sworn statement. My attorney drafted it with me. Page after page, we laid it out like a map. I never requested the loan. I never attended closing. I never authorized correspondence changes. Evan benefited. Evan attempted to remove me from the property immediately after divorce. And then, the twist that made my attorney's eyes narrow. The deed. We requested the recording details. The county clerk provided the notary name attached to the deed transfer. My attorney ran the notary number, and within an hour, she called me. "Olivia," she said, voice low. "The notary commission expired 3 years before your deed was recorded." My mouth went dry. "What?" "It's either a fake stamp," she said, "or someone is using an old commission. Either way, the notarization is invalid. That gives us grounds to challenge the deed." I sat there, hand over my mouth, because suddenly, Evan didn't just steal money. He built his entire victory on a forged stamp, which meant his precious deed might not hold up. 3 weeks later, we were back in court, not for the divorce, for the house, for the debt, for the fraud. Evan showed up in a suit, looking tired for the first time. Tracy wasn't with him. Instead, a man I'd never seen sat beside him. His attorney, a nervous man who kept whispering. Evan glanced at me when I walked in. His eyes were sharper than before. Not smug, not triumphant, angry. Because the story he wanted, "My crazy ex won't leave my house," had turned into something else. A story about a man who might have committed a felony. My attorney sat beside me, calm, organized. She slid a folder across the table. "We have evidence the deed transfer was improperly notarized," she said. "We have evidence the HELOC was opened in her name without informed consent. We have documentation showing the proceeds flowed into his LLC. If he wants this to stay civil, he should settle." Evan's attorney swallowed. Evan hissed under his breath. "What do you want?" he snapped. My attorney didn't blink. "We want an order voiding the deed transfer," she said. "We want her restored on title. We want exclusive occupancy until the loan issue is resolved, and we want him to assume liability for any debt determined valid, or we will pursue damages and refer fraud to law enforcement. Evan's face tightened. He leaned forward, voice low, trying one last time to push. "This is her doing," he said. "She's vindictive. She's trying to ruin me." The judge looked at him, not angry, not sympathetic, just tired. "Mr. Hart," the judge said, "your wife's name is on the loan. Your name is on the deed. Yet you claim you are the victim." Evan's jaw flexed. The judge continued, voice measured. "The court will not decide criminal fraud here," he said, "but the court will decide equitable relief. And based on the documents provided, there are serious questions." Serious questions. The judge granted a temporary order restoring my occupancy rights and preventing any transfer or refinancing of the property until the investigation concluded. Evan's face went pale because he couldn't sell. He couldn't refinance. He couldn't use the house as collateral for his business. His asset was frozen, and now his lover couldn't move in. Tracy texted me that night, not smug this time, just 2 words. "What did you do?" I stared at the message, then deleted it, because Tracy wasn't my problem. Evan was. A month later, Denise called again. Her tone was different, not cautious, final. "Ms. Stone," she said, "our investigation supports your claim. The signature on key documents does not match verified signatures. The notarization process appears improper. We're classifying the account as fraudulent." I couldn't breathe for a second. "What happens now?" I whispered. "We will remove the HELOC from your liability," she said. "We will correct credit reporting, and we are pursuing recovery." Recovery. From Evan. My hands shook. Not from fear, from relief so sharp it hurt. "Thank you," I whispered. Denise paused. "There's one more thing," she said. My stomach tightened again. "What?" "We reviewed the origination. The application listed your income, but also listed an employer you never worked for," she said. "And it listed a phone number for borrower verification that traces to a prepaid device." I closed my eyes. "He fabricated everything," Denise continued, voice steady. "We've referred the case to our internal legal department and to appropriate authorities for review." Appropriate authorities. My throat tightened. "Is he going to be arrested?" I asked. "I can't predict outcomes," she said, "but the evidence is strong." When I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the sunlight on the floor. The same sunlight that had looked so calm the day he came with the truck. Only now, it felt like the world was finally seeing what he did. Evan called that evening. I let it ring. Then he texted, "We need to talk, please. Please." The word tasted strange coming from him. I didn't reply. My attorney replied for me. One clean email. "Per our instructions, all communications go through counsel. Northlake Bank has classified the HELOC as fraud and referred the matter for further action. We are proceeding with petition to void the deed and seek damages." An hour later, Evan showed up at my house anyway. Not with a truck this time. Alone, no Tracy, no folder, just him, standing at the end of my driveway like a man who had run out of magic tricks. I didn't open the door. I spoke through the camera. "What do you want?" His voice sounded raw. "Olivia," he said, "I made a mistake." I almost laughed. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is ordering the wrong paint color. What he did was not a mistake. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he said. I stared at his face on the screen. "You didn't mean for me to find out," I said quietly. His jaw tightened. He looked down, then back up. Just tell them it's a misunderstanding, he pleaded. Please. There it was. The last desperate attempt to put the truth back in the box. I kept my voice calm. No, I said. His eyes flashed. You're going to destroy me. I let the words settle. Then I said the sentence that ended him. You destroyed yourself, I said. I just stopped covering for it. He stood there, breathing hard. For a moment, I saw what he really was. Not a monster with horns. A man who thought love made him untouchable. A man who thought women don't check. Women don't trace. Women don't fight. He took one step forward. Olivia. I cut him off. If you come closer, I'll call the police, I said, and the order is on file. He stopped. His shoulders sagged, and in that moment, for the first time in our entire marriage, Evan looked small. He turned and walked back to his car. He didn't look back. 2 weeks after that, my attorney filed the petition to void the deed. We brought the notary evidence. We brought the bank's fraud classification. We brought the proof of funds flowing into Hart Property Solutions, LLC. And when Evan's attorney saw it all laid out, he asked for settlement. Not because Evan suddenly grew a conscience, because Evan's options were narrowing, fast. The settlement was simple. The deed transfer would be reversed, restoring my rightful interest. The house would be sold. The proceeds would be divided according to the court's equitable decision, factoring my payments and my contribution. And Evan would sign a written agreement acknowledging that any debts or liabilities arising from the fraudulent HELOC would be his responsibility. It wasn't romance. It wasn't revenge. It was accountability in ink. On the day we signed, Evan sat across from me in a conference room that smelled like coffee and paper. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Tracy wasn't there. Because when men like Evan start collapsing, the people who love their confidence disappear. Evan's hand shook slightly as he signed. He didn't apologize. Not really. He just muttered, I never thought you'd do all this. I looked at him, and I spoke softly, because soft can be sharp. I never thought you'd do any of this either, I said. He flinched. The house sold 2 months later. On closing day, I walked through the empty rooms one last time. The hallway where we'd hung pictures, the kitchen counter I'd picked, the porch where he'd smiled like a winner. It was quiet, and for the first time, the quiet didn't feel staged. It felt honest. I left the keys on the counter and walked out. Not because I lost, because I refused to stay tethered to a place built on his lies. My credit recovered, not overnight, but steadily, like a wound finally closing. And Evan, his LLC dissolved. The bank pursued recovery. Authorities reviewed the case. I never chased headlines. I never needed revenge to be loud, because the true power reversal wasn't watching him fall in public. It was watching him realize I was no longer the woman who signed paperwork for a forehead kiss. I was the woman who reads every line, every number, every stamp. And now, when someone says, the house is in his name, I just smile a little, because I learned the truth the hard way. Names on deeds can be changed, but debt, liability, truth, those things don't disappear just because someone wants them to. They follow the paper, and the paper finally led back to him.